I learned at a young age that if I say the right things and I do the right things, then I can get away with things. When I was first getting loaded, like I would start to escort, right? Like that was the perfect way for me to figure out how to make money. I remember looking down at the right, and I just thought like, wow. And I got these butterflies, and up to this point, I was very anti doing anything like that. And I just remember getting these butterflies. And I look down again and I'm like, man, I don't think that's going to be enough for tonight. My first instinct is to get loaded and then to be a mom. Like it's always been wired that way. And I was presented with an opportunity to go down to Mexico to make some money if I was willing to transport some drugs back. 12 o'clock at night, and she gets a phone call that like her daughter's just been arrested and she has to come get her grandkids from Mexico. Like, I'm going to go back to Mexico. Like, I'm going to cross the border. Like, my kids are okay. I'm going to cross the border. I'm going to find somebody who has I'm going to kill somebody.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I'm here with Megan Racer, and we're going to be talking about her story. So check out the interview, and do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the bell so you get notified, and leave me a comment. And if you like the video, share it. So check out the interview. So let's go ahead and just kind of start from, the beginning, which is like where were you born? Brothers, sisters, parents, were they in the picture? That sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been out here. I'm still in Arizona my whole life. My parents were both born out here. My kids were born out here. So I have 3 generations worth of people living in Arizona. I have one sister who's about 7 years younger than I am. So I started my addiction journey much sooner than she did, but we're both in recovery and are sober today. But, I grew up with both my parents in the household. The house was, my house was loving, like I knew my parents loved me and I knew that they could provide well for me. And there just wasn't like connection, there wasn't a lot of emotional connection going on in my household. And for me, it was a really challenging thing as an adult to start then forming those connections with people, especially even after having kids. It was this cycle that I had to consciously break. Autism runs in my family, and I'm like 100% sure my dad's just undiagnosed on the autism spectrum. So as much as he was able to provide, and he was a good provider, he just emotionally wasn't available. Very hyper focused on specific topics, and he's very angry. So having a connection with him was like, okay, we ride dirt bikes together, and we go to the lake and we do all these activities, but that was like very surface level. There weren't any intimate conversations happening in my household between myself and my parents. The situation was a little different with my sister. She had a good connection with my mom. I more so had a connection with my dad on the level of like, we really liked extreme sports. We were both adrenaline junkies together. And so the relationship with my mom didn't start to form until I was in my 30s. Yeah, like the one piece in my family that like held us all together was my grandmother. And she was that one person that I had first initially connected with in my life. She was just a great woman. She loved me for all of my imperfections and, some bad behaviors that I had or whatever. She always showed me just genuine love. And, I take that into like the relationships and into my like value system today. But it was hard. She passed away when I was about 17. So my connection with my family, like I felt like I wasn't a part of it anymore. And so, after she had passed away, I was like junior in high school, right? And I'm still trying to like figure myself out. I don't really have like strong connections or bonds with people. And just, connecting in general was really challenging for me. I didn't have a lot of self-worth growing up. My mom was very self-conscious and really hard on herself. So that, that came across to my sister and I. Like we're all hanging out recently, right? We're at this pool party, like a family function. And my sister and I, we're both sitting there fully clothed. Everyone else is swimming. And we're both like, no, we're not going to get in the pool. Like, just still to this day, it's kind of a challenging thing to get through. And it's definitely, learned behaviors, and we've identified it and like communicated through that. But it was just really challenging. So, when I turned 18, I met a man, that was significantly older than I was. And I fell head over heels for this person. And, up to that point, like I had been a really good student. I graduated high school with like a 3.7 GPA. And I went to college, went to Arizona State University for criminal justice. Because like I really wanted to be an attorney. I really, really liked arguing. I could convince people. Like one of my special talents has always been to like influence. I used it as manipulation when I was younger, but to influence or guide people into my belief system or ways of thinking. And so just being an attorney just sounded like the perfect path for me. Like I really got into criminal justice, and I did some tours at some prisons out here in Arizona. I went to I saw Tent City when Sheriff Joe was the sheriff out here at a time. And I remember I went to a federal camp because we were like learning the difference between state and federal in one of our college classes, right? And there's a medium security men's prison out here in Arizona, and there's a minimum security prison. And that's the one that we went and toured. So I just remember specifically going out there and seeing like all these women who were outside the fence. And I'm just like, this is so weird. They're driving around. They have jobs outside of the prison. And that was kind of like my first introduction in a roundabout way into prison. I really loved and advocated for reentry programs, and like my heart was in the criminal justice system, and I just couldn't really comprehend how different that would look for me, 10 years later down the road. Yeah, so, I'm going to college, and I'm in this relationship with this man who's kind of introducing me to life. I was very young, very naive. Again, didn't make a ton of connections. So like I didn't have a lot of opportunities to make bad choices. I kind of take that back. I got my first like criminal justice experience was as like a 16-year-old girl. I was shoplifting, and I just just got like a high off of it. I had never gotten caught prior to that moment. And I was at, I forget, like Macy's or something. And, I'm putting stuff in my bag, and I'm in the dressing room, right? And they definitely caught me. They pulled me back inside, read me my rights. And I was just like, this is going to suck. Like going home to my mom is going to be really interesting. And like she gave me that line, like, I'm not mad, I'm just super disappointed in the choices that you made,
Right.
And
Very mom.
Right.
Very mom thing to say.
It's such a mom thing to say. But this is my like introduction into getting in trouble, right? Like my mom paid for my fines. I was working at the time. I'd always worked a job, but she paid for my fines. I got diversion court because I was a juvenile. So like there isn't really any record of me committing this crime. I just had to do some community service and call it a day. And so, I learned at a young age that if I say the right things and I do the right things, then I can get away with things, and that's kind of how I lived my life for a long time, was being able to talk my way out of something, or presenting myself in a certain way, or looking a certain way, and things won't be so bad for me. I was working a job. It's probably 16, around the same time. I was working at Walgreens, and I remember a friend, she was like, okay, so I want to go buy shoes. I was like, perfect, and I asked my mom for some cash, and she gave me a couple $100. And I remember my friend's like, well, let's see if we can get some more money. We can buy more shoes. And I'm like, perfect. So she was working the register that day, and I was like buying something, right? And she was just going to slip me more money back for change than like I was supposed to get. So then that happened. We got the shoes, and they ended up calling the cops, and like I told them exactly what happened, and I just got fired. And there wasn't any charges, like nothing happened. So again, I'm diverting from getting in trouble for doing anything. I mean, it felt like I got in trouble because I got fired, but like looking back at it, other people probably would have had some criminal repercussions for doing something like that.
Did your parents find out about that?
Yeah, they found out about that. The store ended up calling them because I was still a minor.
Right.
So I mean, I bullshitted. I skirted around what really happened, and I lied about it. And same situation, with me shoplifting. I always put it off on someone else, like, oh well, they told me to do it, or you know, like they were doing it, so I felt like I could do it because it was okay. And like I grew up in a good household where we knew right from wrong, or like our basis of what right and wrong is, and stealing is not okay. But it was just like, but I think I can get away with it. I think I can use my words in order to fix this situation. I don't think I'm a good criminal by any means, but I think like if I do get in trouble, then that's where I shine. Like, let me show you that I can make this better.
That's
You
not the
know,
time to shine. The time to shine is before you get to that point.
before the fact. So I liked the adrenaline. Again, I was just kind of driven by adrenaline, and like again, riding motorcycles was just this high that I got, and like I can beat you. We'd ride with like the adults, and that was really fun to me. So I was always chasing some kind of high to get outside of myself. And then like partying when I was young, like alcohol. I mean, we're in Arizona, we're by a lot of lakes. There's a lot of house parties, a lot of desert parties that go on, and so alcohol was always prevalent in my life. It was acceptable to drink as a young or an older adolescent, right? It was okay. Like I was getting drunk with my parents' friends, and there wasn't ever like a situation where I was punished. It was like, hey, how does throwing up the next day? Like that's your punishment, you know.
Did your
But
parents did your parents have any addiction, like a alcohol problem or anything? Or
not my
just,
dad.
it was just prevalent. It was just around.
It was prevalent. So my mom isn't an alcoholic. I wouldn't call her an alcoholic. I would say she was more of a problem drinker. She wasn't happy in her marriage, and I knew that. And at like a young age, it was like, why are you guys married? I was very analytical and like literal. Like, you guys don't look happy. You should probably divorce. And that word was talked about, right? So I knew what it meant, and I'm just like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you guys aren't happy. You should probably get a divorce. And so I think my mom used alcohol to solve a lot of her problems, but I don't think she has that gene to where I don't think she has the more gene, right? Where you have to keep going and going
Right.
and going and implode your life. Like, she's been employed with Wells Fargo for 40 years now, to maintain a household. She's functional in her drinking, but it has been a problem. And I don't think she could see my issues because like drinking was really acceptable, but like your 16-year-old daughter shouldn't be drinking so much that she's blacking out
Right.
and then, throwing up the next day. Like, that's not okay.
Okay.
So I did have a couple of instances, obviously, like when I was younger, that I got in trouble, but I never saw myself like living that way. I guess I always saw myself as a good kid who just made some pretty stupid choices along the way, and that like things would just correct themselves because like I'm a good student. All this stuff looks really good. When I went to college, like I met this guy, right? And this was the first person that I felt like could see me, and again, I'm very, have low self-esteem, low self-worth. Like I really put everything that I am into a man. And this is after losing the connection with my grandmother. And I finally felt like, oh my gosh, I have a connection again to another person. And this is what I've been seeking. Connection has always been the thing that I've wanted in my life. And I thought I had found it with him. And he was the one that had introduced me, to drugs. Like, I always drank, but I was like, no, I'll never, ever touch that stuff. I was very adamant that I wouldn't. But when I was 18 and, I remember one night we're living together and he comes home pretty late, and I didn't really know what he was doing a lot of the time, but he came home pretty late and he lays down this spread, right? And he just has like this decent size, mound of cocaine, and he has opiates with him. And I just remember I remember looking down at the cocaine, right? And I just thought like, wow. And I got these butterflies, and up to this point, I was very anti doing anything like that. And I just remember getting these butterflies, and I looked down again and I'm like, man, I don't think that's going to be enough for tonight. Like, mind you, I've never I've never touched a substance like this before. Like, I don't even know what it's going to do to me, but like knowing how I am and just my brain instantly was like, this isn't going to be enough for tonight. And then I did it and I was like, this is definitely not going to be enough for tonight.
Using forgeries and bogus identities, Matthew B. Cox, one of the most ingenious con men in history, built America's biggest banks out of millions. Despite numerous encounters with bank security, state, and federal authorities, Cox narrowly, and quite luckily, avoided capture for years. Eventually, he topped the U.S. Secret Service's most wanted list and led the U.S. Marshals, FBI, and Secret Service on a 3-year chase, while jet-setting around the world with his attractive female accomplices. Cox has been declared one of the most prolific mortgage fraud con artists of all time by CNBC's American Greed. Bloomberg Businessweek called him the mortgage industry's worst nightmare, while Dateline NBC described Cox as a gifted forger and silver-tongued liar. Playboy magazine proclaimed his scam was real estate fraud, and he was the best. Shark in the Housing Pool is Cox's exhilarating first-person account of his stranger-than-fiction story. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
And like that was the start of the obsession. Like that's 18 years old, that obsessive thinking kicked in immediately after I took that first line. And the next drug that he had introduced was opiates, and he's just like, take a piece of this, and took half of it, swallowed it, and it was like, oh, this is how people live. Like this is how I'm supposed to feel. It was like I was home in my body, because I had always felt like a foreign entity inside of my body, and like didn't really understand why I was here, couldn't really connect again, and like drugs became this perfect place for me to just be me, and I talk a lot about that. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What did this guy do for a living?
So he was a millwright, a union millwright. So when we first got together, he had started his apprenticeship with the millwright union. And so he didn't make a lot of money. He worked a lot, and, I helped support through some things. But, he worked, once he got into the profession and, became a journeyman, like he was working, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for months on end. So drugs, that was just the perfect world. Like most of the people that work like that are getting loaded.
Right.
Yeah. So, and to me, like, I didn't know that previously, because again, he's much older than I am. I didn't know that he had a drug problem before we even got to know each other. That was something that he had struggled with when he came out to Arizona. So for me, this is like
how much older?
think 7 or 8 years older than I was.
Oh, okay.
But
I mean,
like
at 18,
that's huge.
Yeah. At 18, yes.
At 18. So I'm 35 now, right? And I look back at my 18-year-old self, and to think of being with somebody that much older than me, there's nothing that we have in common. You know, I was an easy target to manipulate and use. And he wanted to live a lifestyle where I didn't ask a lot of questions, and I didn't, you know. But that was my introduction into the drug world, you know. So he was basically my dealer at that point. Like, I kind of depended on him to get what I needed, but I didn't ask, you know. Like, I knew in my brain like how much I had obsessed over it, and I was just like, okay, just wait until he brings it up, wait till he brings it to you, don't ever ask, you know what I mean? Like, it was these steps of the yets, I guess, where it's like I'm not to the point where I have to ask and make something like this happen. Like, I'll just let him have it happen, versus like becoming, you know, later in life, this heroin IV user who's seeking drugs every day. I just knew that I could get to that point, and I didn't want to get there.
Right. All right. So did you end up graduating school or?
Right. So I was with this person for 3 years. We were engaged to get married, you know, like had a really fantastic relationship with his family. He was from back east, so we would go out there a lot and hang out. And, you know, again, there were a lot of firsts with this guy. So he was my first like abusive relationship, you know. The first time he had ever put his hands on me, we weren't doing that great. And I don't realize like he's got a drug problem at this point. Like, I don't understand this world yet. Still pretty naive, but like we get high together sometimes, you know? And so we go to Mexico, and like he's on steroids. He's making his own steroids, right? So he's big guy, pretty angry at some points. And we go to Mexico just to kind of have a vacation because he's working a lot. And, you know, he gets really, really drunk, and he's probably on other stuff. And I just remember him getting really angry at me, and we're in our room, and he just grabs me by the throat, pushes me up against the wall. And I'm like 5'8", right? Like, he's a strong guy. And I just remember him holding me there with his arm back. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do about it. And he lets me go. And I run out of the room, and I go downstairs, and it's like nighttime, and I'm sitting on this bench just crying hysterically. And like somebody comes up to me, and they're like, hey, do you need something? And for me, it's like I was taught, like, you don't talk about shit, you know, you don't talk about these things. And so I was like, no, I'm okay. And I cried a little bit more. And then I went back up to the bedroom. He was like laying down, passed out, and I just fell asleep. And like, it was never talked about, you know, like situations like that would happen. And it just didn't get talked about between him and I, because I don't want to bring it up. I know he's not bringing it up, and I'm not telling my family. Right. You know, we don't have a relationship like that where I feel like I can, or even knowing that's an option. But so a couple other instances happened with him.
I was gonna say, bringing it up could just spark another incident, you know. So
right.
I get not bringing it up.
Yeah. And he just, you know, he's a very smart man, very charismatic, came off very kind and loving, and behind closed doors, it was just a very different situation, you know. And you add drugs into that, and I'm sure drugs had a lot to do with his outbursts and his anger and his frustration, but it's not an excuse to be a shitty human, you know.
Right.
So like 3 years into our relationship, like I should have known he had been cheating, and I just didn't want to see the signs. But he was like a traveling journeyman. So he was in California a lot. And I had noticed he kept going to this one particular job site a lot, and that he had this like new friend who was a female. And, you know, it wasn't okay if I had men who were friends, and he was trying to create it in a way where it's like, no, this is just a friend. Like, it's okay for me to do it, but not you, kind of situation. And it came down to like, he was, in fact, cheating on me with this person that he had met in California. I found out, and I had left like as soon as I found out. And, I was just like, we're done. And he's like, okay, we're done. And we had like lived in a house together, and he packed his stuff up that week and then moved out to California with her. So for me, like, I had never really experienced any kind of heartache, and I had invested so much of who I am in this person. When he left, it was like, well, I don't know who I am anymore. Like, I couldn't find me for me. So I just remember, yeah.
Real quick, how did you find out that he was cheating on you?
So he came back from California, where I knew she was at, and he kept telling me nothing's going on, but they kept communicating. So I grabbed his phone and I went through everything, and I saw their text messages. I saw, the pictures back and forth. And so that day, like, I didn't sleep, right, the whole night because he was sleeping. And so I went through his phone. I emailed everything to myself. I went to my mom's and I printed it. And then I came back to our house and had all the stuff printed, right? Like all the pictures and the messages. And I like threw it on the bed, and I was like, do you want to tell me about this? And he just didn't care. He's like, like he knew he was caught. There wasn't any manipulating or making excuses about it. And I just had walked out that day. I spent like $1,000 or something in like clothes and stuff at the mall. And yeah, I moved out. I had moved out, and there wasn't like, let's try to make this work. Let's get back together. Nothing like that. Like, he was pretty solid in the choice that he had made to be with her. So that like damaged me, I feel like that damaged me more than it really should have. Like, most people are like, oh, this sucks and it hurts, and like I have heartbreak, but like I don't have to use drugs because somebody was cheating on me and the relationship is over. Like, I can grieve properly and then move on with my life. But my choice was to start doing drugs more. And so I picked up opiates a lot more once he left.
Well, it helps dull the pain, It
does. It made me feel good. I was like, this drug right here is the one thing I feel like I have a solid connection with, and that's not fucking me over in my life. Like, this is perfect. And I could afford it at the time. There were like Oxy 30s, and the 80s were around then. I'd get them from like decently, I'd always had decent connections to where it wasn't like super, super expensive. So I was kind of just doing my own thing for a while. I was in college, working at restaurants and stuff. Ended up finding this one guy who was like connected with my ex. Like, they worked in the same industry, and those guys make pretty good money, right? And my motivation for being with a man was always like, what are you going to do to provide for me? Or like what kind of drugs are you going to give me? There was always a motivation for me behind being with somebody.
Right.
Financial gain, drugs. That was it. And sex. Like, give me those three, and that's it. That's all I need. So with this guy, apparently he was a recovering heroin addict, and he ended up relapsing when we were together. So it's just, I have a really good picker at this time. So like but the thing is, like, I'm in my addiction too, like I'm sneaking oxys behind his back. He's sneaking heroin behind my back. Like, there's some abusive moments that happen in this relationship because I keep finding out he's using heroin. And like, I'm at this point never had touched that stuff, right? Like, it was disgusting to me. I couldn't believe he was doing something like that. And I'm like studying for the LSATs. I'm in my senior year of college, and I end up leaving him, and again, connecting another man to this one, somebody he grew up with, who is my children's father now. I see him. We all go to a wedding together, right? And I remember my children's father walking into the reception hall, and he just has this I don't give a attitude, right? Doesn't care. And we're sitting at the bar, and he puts his foot up on the bar, and he has like these white, just long socks, right? With this suit, because he's one of the groomsmen. So he's supposed to be super sophisticated, looking good. And he's wearing these just long socks that you know what I mean? It just doesn't go together. And I just remember thinking, God, what a rebel. Like, this man is a rebel. And, you know, I'm kind of with the other person at this point at the wedding, like I'm his date, but I'm also like eyeing my children's father.
Right.
And so we like connect on Facebook, right? It's like pretty big at the time. We connect, and he's like living out in the Chandler area, right around where Arizona State University kind of is. And I'm out there still going to college. And we met up one night, like went on a date. And I just remember I moved in with him immediately after that. Again, I latch on, because I found out like, oh, you can get me my drugs. Like, we had Coke, we had Oxys, like, you know, you get me what I need.
What happened with the other guy?
I stopped talking to him. Yeah. He ended up, he couldn't maintain sobriety, you know, he couldn't keep a needle out of his arm. And I was just like, I can't do this lifestyle. Like, I have so much going on behind the scenes. I'm like getting loaded, you know, but in my head, it's like, this is a legal source of drugs and I'm not addicted, but I'm obsessively thinking about it. You know, like, that is number one on my mind. It's not school. It's not like anything else but getting loaded. So yeah, he and I stopped talking, and I start, I guess, dating, hooking up, whatever you want to call it, with my children's father. He's supplying my drug habit at this time. And I remember I'm working at Olive Garden, and you know, I drive into work one day, and so like mental health, right? Like, me struggling with my mental health is a huge part of my story. And I just didn't know it. Like, I didn't understand mental health back then. But I remember walking into work and just like breaking down crying. And again, like, got my drugs with me, so that's good. But like, I was just sitting in the back, right, at like behind a table, just bawling my eyes out. And like, one of our managers sees me, and they're like, you need to go home. So I go home, and like, I never went back. Like, my thing is ghosting. You know, that's been a really hard habit for me to break. It's just like, if I don't want to be somewhere, or I get uncomfortable, or I don't want to change, I'm gone. So I never went back to that job, and that created a big problem for me, because like, I heavily depended on their dad at that point, you know. And with school, like, I was a senior in college, about to get my BA.
You heavily
I had one more class.
You said you heavily depended on what?
On their dad, on Sean, my children's father.
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand.
No, you're good. So yeah, I'm in my senior year of college, and I have one class to graduate to get my bachelor's in criminal justice, and then, you know, to go to law school. And I quit my senior year, and my drug habit got really bad at that point. I think
is there a specific reason you quit?
Because it was getting in the way of my drug using.
Okay. I mean, were you you were failing? You just couldn't do both?
No. I think a lot of it is just a failure to succeed. Again, like, I don't think I'm worth much at this point, especially like failed relationship after failed relationship, and where I'm putting my worth is in relationships. So my senior year rolls around, and so I do have this bad drug habit, right? I'm living with a man who I don't really like, and then I find out I'm pregnant, and just a combination of everything. I don't want to do life anymore. I don't want to do this world anymore, because the drugs are supposed to make me happy. I'm not happy. you know. And so I go through our pregnancy, and it's just tumultuous with him. You know, he ended up becoming a heroin addict at this time during my pregnancy, and I'm trying to quit using oxys while I'm pregnant, and it's like I can't stop. About 7 months into my pregnancy, like we're no longer talking at this time. I'm like back at with my mom. I end up quitting using the opiates at like 7 months pregnant with my daughter. And I have my daughter at 9 months. You know, like with my pregnancies, right? I didn't tell my mom I was pregnant because she didn't like Sean. She never approved of him. You know, nobody in my family liked him. Nobody's liked any of the men I've been with. But so I finally tell her around, 7 months pregnant that I'm like, hey, you're going to have your first grandkid, by the way. And it's Sean's. And, she was just like, there was never like excitement around my pregnancies. So I guess talking about those things is really hard. It wasn't a fun time for me, like being in my 20s and being pregnant. Looking back at it now, I really missed out. Like I missed out on the joy and the looking forward to having a kid, because I can't get my shit together. My mental health sucks. And like, I keep wanting to get loaded. And now I have a child on the way.
Your mom didn't, I thought you said like you were living with your mom. She didn't notice you were pregnant?
Well, I was about like 7 months pregnant when I moved in with her, but no, you can't really tell that I'm pregnant when I'm pregnant.
Wow.
It takes a while.
Okay.
Yeah. I just don't really show.
Right.
And we don't have this like super tight relationship at this time. So, and I thought she would just be angry, I'm a people pleaser, like I want to avoid her having hard feelings for as long as I possibly can, and then just throw a bomb. So I end up having my daughter. It's not really working out living at my mom's, so I move in with my cousin, right? And they're, Sean comes back around, their dad, and he starts hanging out with me while I'm living with my cousin. And he's still using heroin, right? Like he's still getting loaded on a daily basis. I had never tried it at this point. And I remember I would find it like in his truck or hidden somewhere, and I would throw it away, and he would get so angry at me. And I just didn't understand, like, why are you getting so angry? It's not that serious. Like, I just didn't know the physical hold that heroin had on your body. Not just the mental, spiritual, emotional. It's the physical hold that this drug has. And I remember my daughter was probably like 2 months old. And I remember finding, his drugs in his truck. And I took it out, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do some today. And I told him that I'd found it before he like was off to work or whatever, right? And I said, I'm going to do this. And he was like, okay, just give me half of it. You do the other half. Give me some money and I'll pick more up tonight. I'm like, okay. So that started off my like 2-year heroin bender with my, small child in my life. There was just a lot of moving from different place to place. I had always maintained a job, working in like restaurants and stuff. And for some reason I was able to maintain that in an okay lifestyle for my daughter. But, I was just a degenerate. Like I was getting loaded and hoping that my daughter was okay. And like a lot of his family would help out with her. And then it came to the point one day, like he had ended up leaving us, right? Because we would live together, and then they wouldn't live together, and we would live together and we lived with his dad. And he ended up moving back to Missouri with his mom at this point. And I think my daughter's about 2.5, and his side of the family calls CPS. So CPS gets involved. I can't test clean to save my life. Like I was very honest with them. They're like, are you getting loaded? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I just kept failing the drug test. So they opened up a petition through juvenile court And, you know, both dad and I had tested positive for heroin. So we both had this open petition through CPS. And I ended up signing over my rights to my daughter to the state and to his side of the family. Because again, I'm not close with my side of the family at this time. And my daughter knows them a lot better. So I go to rehab. I do really well in rehab, and I'm like going back and forth with this case, and dad ends up coming back to Arizona from Missouri. I'm about 6 months sober at this time, and we're both like testing at Task, which was like a place you'd call, get the number or the color, and you'd go in, right?
Right.
So we both got called on the same night. And you know, I'm sober, he's kind of sober, but he's still like drinking a bunch. And we go and we like have dinner that night. And then we end up going back to like where he's staying at with his dad and where my daughter's at, and we get pregnant with my son.
You need to get that?
No, it was my son.
Oh, okay.
Speak of the devil. So we end up getting pregnant with my son. I'm about six months sober at this point. I let him know a month later when I found out, and he was just like, I don't want to have another kid. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not getting rid of it. Like I'm pregnant, I'm having this kid. And it was around Cinco de Mayo. So I found out I was pregnant in January around Cinco de Mayo, and we still have this case going on. He's getting loaded at this point. Like he's going out drinking and doing all that stuff. He tries to kill himself. And I remember being pregnant, and I get the phone call that like he's in the hospital, he's going to the psych ward. I'm like a 72-hour hold. I find out where he is, and I get on the phone with him, and I'm just like, hey, you know, like that day that I found out where he was and was able to talk to him, like I had found out we were having a son. And I told him on the phone, I'm like, you know, I need you to be around, like we're having a son together. And he was just like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to be his dad.
Right.
And that was, you know, it was heartbreaking. It was really devastating because I saw how much love he had for his daughter. And it was just really challenging for me to understand like how he couldn't want to have that with his son too. And he was fighting so hard during the CPS case for his daughter, you know? So that case ends up getting closed. They award my daughter back to me, and like I get custody of her. And I end up like having my son, Sean, you know, he gets off the 72-hour hold. And again, he like just moves back to Missouri at this point. Cause that's just kind of what he does. Like his mom fully supports all of his choices he makes. So, you know, I have these two kids, and like, I'm sober at this point, right? Like life is really fucking amazing. I'm a part of one of those anonymous groups, right? And I'm happy. Like I'm really, really genuinely happy. I'm working on myself. I'm a single mom. I'm supporting myself and my kids. And I get a job working for Maricopa County Superior Court. And I love it. You know, it was really challenging, and I got to know all kinds of things, right? Like it's in the realm I wanted to be in initially. Like I'm learning about the criminal procedures and the probate, civil, all of it. And it was right up my alley, and I did very well when I worked there. So when I think my son was about a year old, his dad came back to Arizona, and I let him live on my couch at this point. And that was the start of, I guess, what life had in store for me at that point. About 2 years into my sobriety, I relapsed with their dad on alcohol. And I remember he was watching the kids when I was at work one day, and he came home and he was like, hey, I've got something for you. And I went back to my bathroom. He opened up the medicine cabinet, and, you know, he had the foil and everything ready. And he was like, here. And like nothing in my body could have resisted getting loaded in that moment. You know, like something in the rooms like that's heavily coveted is your sobriety date. And they say it's not, but it is. And I had already lost my sobriety date. And it was just like, all right, this is what's going to happen. And, a couple weeks later, he shot me up for the first time. And that's when I became like, I was a slave to the drug. I was still working for the court system, getting loaded, like going on my lunch break to get loaded and coming back, being in the parking lot, and this went on for a while, like 8 months. He ended up leaving to go back to Missouri, and he like does that, right? Like we'll get loaded together. He'll go to Missouri, get off of heroin, and I'm generally left with the kids and a really bad drug habit at that point. So my lease is up.
Expensive? I mean, isn't it expensive? I mean, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I maintained a household. My kids had food in their bellies. They had the lights on. Like everything was at the base level of being maintained. And I was broke all the time.
And then he leaves.
And then he leaves. Yeah. So there were times, right, where when I was first getting loaded, like I would start to escort, right? Like that was the perfect way for me to figure out how to make money. I didn't want like pictures and stuff on the internet, but I was okay with using men because at this point I didn't like them. I didn't value men. I had like a huge chip on my shoulder. So if I could just take money from you and give you a piece of me that I don't really care about, it's okay. And when I got sober that first time, I had like continued to escort in sobriety, and that was kind of difficult for me. But like, again, I'm a single mom, so I need to be able to like maintain. So that was kind of always my go-to when I was getting loaded, was to use my body to get what I needed. But so he leaves, my lease is up, and I end up moving back into my mom's house. And God, my mom, like she knows about my drug habit from previously. She doesn't realize that I'm still getting loaded, or she just chooses not to see that her daughter has relapsed and is really bad. But during that time, when I had moved, I got promoted at work. I don't know how, but I got promoted at my job, and I'm like a courtroom clerk at this point. So I'm like working, hand in hand with the judge there, writing stuff for them, like doing their docket and whatnot. But this is where I feel I still have a lot of guilt for what I did there. Like I'd bring all my stuff into the courthouse, like I'd have my big cup full of Fireball that I would just leave at my desk. So I'd go into the courtroom and I just wouldn't care. It's like if someone found out, they found out. But like it'd be at my desk, and I'd have all the stuff I needed to like cook a shot, do a shot in the bathroom, like go in the parking lot. Like my life revolved around getting loaded on my breaks, going out, getting loaded, coming back. Like I don't know how I was able to maintain for as long as I did.
Right.
It was yeah, it was it's just a hard time to look back on in my life, because I don't approve of the things I did. I don't approve of being in that kind of position and, not being 100% fully there, because like I'm watching these juveniles get sentenced to like, prison for the next 5-6 years, or going off to rehab or whatever. Like they're fighting, and I'm sitting there being such a hypocrite, getting loaded in front of them, so I end up quitting that job. I had March of 2018, I quit that job, like cashed my 401k out with them. So I had a little bit of money to live on for a little bit and to get my drugs and all of that. I ended up moving out of my mom's house again, right? Because like the thing is, when you're in active addiction, you have to move around a lot, because the people that you're around are going to start to become pretty aware of what you're doing. And when they start to come to realization, like that's when you need to go. So me being a woman in active addiction doesn't take away from the fact that like I still have to support 2 little kids who depend on me and love me. You know, I wish that like, I don't know, people look at women and it's like, oh, well, you don't have this maternal instinct to just take care of your kids and not get loaded. Like, what's wrong with you? And it's like, my first instinct is to get loaded and then to be a mom. Like it's always been wired that way. And so I do like talking about these certain things because it's important. It's important for women to understand that like just because we have the ability to have children and then it generally becomes our responsibility to then stick around with them doesn't mean that we're exempt from becoming major addicts and eventually dying from this disease, you know? So it's important. I mean, it's important for me to let other women out there know, and parents in general, like this can happen. This does happen on a daily basis. I'm not special. My story is not unique. I'm just willing to talk about it. So quit my job, right? I'm like pretty deep into just getting loaded, working with Pisces, like I never really dabbled in drug dealing. I mean, like back in the day when I was at ASU, when it was like the oxy world, right? Like sell some here and there, whatever. But I was always just the user, you know. I couldn't keep enough stock to ever think about becoming a dealer and selling. So I was just connected with some people that were bringing heroin into Arizona. And I was presented with an opportunity to go down to Mexico to make some money if I was willing to transport some drugs back. So
boy, that already sounds bad.
Right.
That just the idea of it already is like, whoa, this is a problem. This could go bad.
And it's not like in my head, I didn't see it as a problem. You know, I'm so far into my addiction and my kids are right there with me. You know, I'd always like prided myself like, oh, no, my kids never saw me shoot up, but like they had to live the lifestyle I was living simultaneously. So like, no, that's not okay. And I think it's important for, you know, people like me to look back at the choices that we made and almost like cringe and be disgusted. And like, kind of, it makes me super tearful, you know, like my kids absolutely love me. And I'm like, they're my number one fan, you know, and they have unconditional love for me. And it's so freaking amazing to see that. And like them having that much love for me has made it easy for me to find love for myself. Without that, I don't know where it would be. But just as looking at it sober, it's like, wow, I made horrible choices as a mom. You know, I chose to bring these kids into this world and I was not doing right by them, but they loved the shit out of me. So I was, yeah.
I have a question. Like one, like I mean, you're saying you were presented. So this is somebody that you're dealing with that's supplying you. Is this and how is that? How do you even broach that subject? They make it sound like, oh, it's not a big deal. They put it in a compartment that they've already paid the guard. You drive right through. It's no big deal. We do it all the time. There's no risk. Is it like that, or is it like, listen, there's a damn good chance you're going to get caught and go to jail? I mean,
no, nothing like that. There wasn't a ton of information communicated because a lot of it was just over the phone. Like I've met these people over the phone, right? And they were like, just come down and we'll talk to you about it when you get here. Like as minimal information as possible. And you know, and I was like, that's perfect because I don't want to talk about this on the phone. Like I'd rather talk to you in person. And like if something were to happen, like I wouldn't have that much I wouldn't have a lot of information on the phone. Like I went into this blind 100%, and I brought my children with me.
Okay. You went to Mexico you brought your kids with, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, we get down there, and like I'm probably meeting with just like the low man on the totem pole, right? They're kind of explaining to me like what they want me to do. They get a vehicle for me. It's like at the Yuma border of Arizona, so they bring this like truck, right? And they want me to go cross the border to Arizona to get it registered in my name. So like someone else had it registered in their name in Arizona, right? So they gave me the registration. I cross over the border and I get it registered in my name, and then they pick up some food, whatever, and cross back over the border. I'm there for about a week and a half. It takes a while. I'm not really like understanding why it's taking this long. Not a ton of people know where I'm at. My family definitely doesn't know where I'm at. Like the people I deal with on a daily basis with like my drug transactions know where I am. And so like, yeah, I mean, we're in Mexico, like they're supplying me drugs still. Cause like, again, I'm a IV heroin user. Like I have to have it or I'm going to be sick. And my kids, like we're at this hotel basically, right? Like we're just sitting at this hotel. We'll go out once in a while, get food. They'll bring food. Like we go and, walk around and just like explore. So I'm like in my head trying to make this situation as normal as I possibly can. But like me thinking about it and looking back, like it's so triggering. Because I had put myself in such a bad situation, and it would be one thing if it was just me there, like it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But like, because I included my children in such a horrible situation, like it's really, really challenging to talk about.
I understand.
So there wasn't like there were conversations about what they would like me to do, right? Like my goal in going down to Mexico was just to have conversation. I didn't know if I would actually be transporting at that point. I told them I wasn't ready because we did a couple runs back and forth from Mexico to Arizona, right? Just to get the vehicle crossing the border so it didn't look as suspicious when I would cross that first time, right? So I remember I had crossed like a third time, and this isn't with anything. This is just me going back and forth from Mexico to America. And the third time they sent me to secondary. They weren't buying my story as to why I was in Mexico. So they go to secondary. They have me go to secondary, and they check the vehicle. Like there's nothing there, and they let me go. So I remember going back to them, and I'm like, hey, listen, like this truck isn't going to work. Like, let's try to do a different vehicle, but like this one isn't going to work. They sent me to secondary. Like they wanted to see if I would get popped as suspicious. And I did, and they were like, okay, like we're going to figure something out. And I remember one night I'm driving the truck, and the truck's like off, right? Like it's driving, it's revving up and then going down and revving up and going down. And I tell them about it, and they're like, okay, like we're going to take it in and have somebody fix it. And we're going to bring it back to you, and you're going to go. Like we're going to have you leave, and we have a different job for you. I'm like, okay. So they bring it back, they park it overnight, and I wake up the next day, and, I'm trying to like find drugs most of that day. Right. And I finally get a hold of what I need, and it's later in the day. And they were like, okay, well, we need you to leave. It's like 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, okay, I need to go do something real quick. And I was like, got everything packed up, right? And my kid's there, and I was going to go pick up from this one guy that I had met down in Mexico. And all of a sudden they're behind me, like they knew where I was. And it was really weird. And again, I'm not I'm not connecting dots, you know, like I'm not in a mindset to connect dots. My brain is on one thing and one thing only. And they were like, you need to go. What are you doing? Like, you need to go to America. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm just trying to get what I need. So they're like, just go park by the border. We'll get you what you need. Get your, you know, do what you need to do. And then we need you to cross back over. So what they wanted me to do, or what they told me they wanted me to do, was go back over to America, go buy a new phone. And they were going to text me the address I was going to go to in Arizona to transport money up to Cali.
Okay, but at this point, is the drug already packed? I mean, is the truck already packed with drugs?
Unbeknownst to me, yes.
Okay, right.
In which they had it sitting there apparently overnight, all day the next day to the very end of the night. So like, yeah.
Nobody's going to touch that truck. Like, they've got people watching the truck. They've got, you know,
right.
I've spoken with lots of people where they just, you know, it's very common for them to, you drop a vehicle off, somebody picks it up, they bring it back 3 days later, it's packed, it'll sit there for overnight, maybe 2 days. You get in it, you drive back, but they have so many people watching those vehicles and just watching, like, nobody's stealing from cartel members.
Right.
In those areas, they're so under control and everybody's on the take. So,
yeah.
So, you know,
and I mean, that's why they knew where it was at. Like, that's how they knew where I was. And I'm just so not willing to see the signs that are in front of me.
Well, I don't think anybody would realize how connected they are. And, you know, especially in the state of mind that you're in, you know, you're a drug addict, you're only focused on, you know, maintaining, you know, keeping food in your kid's mouth and maintaining your habit. And honestly, that's probably why they packed the truck, because they didn't want you to know, because you will be less nervous. You won't be as suspected going through. You're not going to raise any red flags. You think your job is in 2 days when you bring money here, but really your job is just driving across the border and you didn't even realize it. So I can see from their perspective.
Yeah. Like, explaining the story to people, you know, I don't go into detail. Like, I'll do podcasts and things, right? Now I'll sometimes, depending on the person, right? Like, if I don't like the person that's interviewing me, like, I'm not going in depth with that, because like, you don't get a piece of me like that, you know? But when I do, I explain it, but it's hard doing that like on just a one-on-one kind of thing, because it's always like these million questions where it's like, I don't know. I was not in the right state of mind. Like, they used me as a pawn, and it's embarrassing. You know, I made no money from this transaction.
Right.
I lost my kids. I lost my freedom. I lost everything. And I didn't have a stake in it. You know what I mean? I didn't have any money in this. Like, nothing was being given to me out of this whole situation. And yeah, I guess like embarrassing is the number one thing that pops into my mind, that like is the feeling that's associated with it. And then shame is something I've had to work on with involving my kids in this shit, you know? So,
well, you
that
know,
night,
I'm sorry, I was just going to say,
no.
it's sometimes the, you know, like it's funny how the worst thing that could possibly happen to you at the moment is very possibly the best thing that could have happened to you in your life. And it just, you know, it takes time to figure that out.
It does. Oh, it takes a lot of time. Yeah, so I get my stuff, whatever. I buy my kids like treats and snacks, right? Because we're gonna probably be driving for a little bit. And I pull up, right? I tell them my bullshit story, and they're like, nah, go to secondary. And so this is my second time going into secondary, right? So in my head, I'm just like, this is fine. You know, they're going to do what they did last time. No big deal. And then I will be on my way. That is not what happened. So they brought out the drug dog like they did the first time, and the drug dog hit. And I just remember, you know, they have you get out of the vehicle regardless. But I do remember seeing the drug dog hit. I go into like the little holding area, right, where people wait. And I remember seeing just a ton of people come out to my truck, and they've got this camera, and I'm just like, oh fuck, what's about to happen? And I have drugs on me, got my rig full, ready to go. Like, I was fully ready to just transition to the next point of my life. And that's not what happened.
Buried by the US government and ignored by the national media, this is the story they don't want you to know. When Frank Amadeo met with President George W. Bush at the White House to discuss NATO operations in Afghanistan, no one knew that he'd already embezzled nearly $200 million from the federal government. Money he intended to use to bankroll his plan to take over the world. From Amadeo's global headquarters in the shadow of Florida's Disney World, with a nearly inexhaustible supply of the Internal Revenue Service's funds, Amadeo acquired multiple businesses, amassing a mega conglomerate. Driven by his delusions of world conquest, he negotiated the purchase of a squadron of American fighter jets and the controlling interest in a former Soviet ICBM factory. He began working to build the largest private militia on the planet, over 1 million Africans strong. Simultaneously, Amadeo hired an international black ops force to orchestrate a coup in the Congo, while plotting to take over several small Eastern European countries. The most disturbing part of it all is, had the US government not thwarted his plans, he might have just pulled it off. It's insanity, the bizarre, true story of a bipolar megalomaniac's insane plan for total world domination. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
It actually was the next transition of your life. It wasn't the one you were hoping for at that moment.
No.
No,
it wasn't. So yeah, they came in and they're like, ma'am, you need to come with us. You're under arrest. And I'm just like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And they put me in this like holding cell area, right? And my kids are with me, and I'm like trying to hug them, and they're like, ma'am, we can either arrest you in front of them, or like we'll take them and we'll handcuff you and all that. And so I had given them one last hug, and they walked my kids out, and they patted me down, did a search on me, and they didn't find anything on me. So they put me back in the cell, right? And they shut the door. And I swear to you, I've never felt so free, like the madness and the chaos was over. It's like, to try to maintain a lifestyle where you're a mom, you're an employee, you're doing all these things on top of like shooting up a couple grams of heroin a day, drinking and using meth, like it's too much. It was a doable thing for a little bit, but I couldn't maintain that lifestyle. So like being arrested, I didn't know what was going to happen to me when that door shut, but like that was freeing. I was done. Like that
Right.
Life was over with. That chapter was over. And so like whatever they didn't find on me, like I ended up taking, and like I didn't realize now, because like fentanyl wasn't a thing, but it was a couple fentanyl pills, a thing of heroin, and like a little thing of meth, and I just took it all. Like I didn't care. I swallowed what I needed to swallow, snorted what I needed to snort, and like I ended up passing out for like an hour, and then they woke up and they interrogated me. And so, they woke up and they graciously, and I don't know how this happened, but they were like, who do we need to call to get your kids? And I was just like, you're not going to call CPS? And like, no, like, who do we need to call to get your kids? And so that's when they made the phone call to both my parents, and looking back, like there's moments of spiritual awakening and like realizing the things that we put our loved ones through, and like the crimes we commit, or just things that we do. And that was one of those moments where, thinking about it, like my mom is laying in her bed, it's 12 o'clock at night, and she gets a phone call that like her daughter's just been arrested and she has to come get her grandkids from Mexico. So it's like, I put myself in her position of how she would feel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, those moments are what I needed though. Like I needed to really see the pain that I caused people. And you know, she's like a Wonder Woman. I love her so much. She's amazing. She, no questions asked, got in her car and came and rescued my kids, and like provided a life for them that I wasn't able to give them. You know, she saved my kids from me. And you know, I got interrogated and they're not really buying my story, and I'm not being honest with what's going on. But you know, when I remember when I first went in there for the interrogation, I sat down and they're like, "Do you know why you're here? You know, like what did your day look like?" And I kind of explained my day to them, right? And they're like, "Well, that doesn't quite add up to what's going on. Like, tell me what happened." And I don't know what you want from me. I don't understand. And they told me, "Well, we found 32 kilos of meth in your truck. So what you're telling us isn't aligning with what we found in your vehicle."
That's a lot.
And I lost it. I couldn't even comprehend. I couldn't comprehend what they were telling me. You know, I obviously have a lot of remorse and guilt over what happened. And there's still like some things I need to work through, but I didn't realize. I just couldn't comprehend. Didn't make sense to me. And so, you know, I went, got interrogated. I ended up being able to give my kids hugs goodbye. They were like very kind to my kids, and they were kind to me. They didn't have to be, you know. And I remember the marshal or whoever it was that did my interrogation, he drove me handcuffed, right? My first time ever being handcuffed, like drove me to the detention center and like processed it, and that takes forever. And they put me in like a medical holding cell because they knew I was like high. And the next day, like I slept all night. I was just so done, so tired. I slept like that whole night, and I woke up, and at this point I'm feeling it from my heroin withdrawal. You know, they box and shackle you up. They send me off to court. And you know, I just remember in my head thinking like this, I think I had to see the judge twice. For my initial, I can't remember. It's all kind of blurry, but I remember before maybe my first or second hearing that I had that like, okay, cool, this judge is going to let me out. You know, they're going to see that I'm like an upstanding citizen. This is a mistake. This is a mistake. And, but in my head, I was like, I'm going to go back to Mexico. Like, I'm going to cross the border. Like, my kids are okay. I'm going to cross the border. I'm going to find somebody who has a fucking gun. I'm going to kill somebody. And I'm going to get my stuff, and I'm going to cross back over to the border and handle this later. Like that, it's not my way of thinking normally. You know, I'm a very rational person, and I was going into some really weird, demented, dark places. And so when I went in for my hearing, to figure out like if I could get out or whatever, it was just like, yeah, we're transporting you up to Florence, Arizona. Like, back to like where I lived, right? And that I was going to stay in custody. Rightfully so. I had 89 pounds of meth in my vehicle. Like, I was delusional.
Right.
And when I met with the attorney for the first time, right? And they show you that chart, the breakdown of where you're at. I thought
I was going to say where you fell on the sentencing guidelines.
Yeah, I was level 36 or 38.
Oh man.
Yeah, so, it was like 188 to like 235 years in prison is what I saw on paper after factoring where I landed. And again, I'm not
You
like,
mean months? You mean months?
I'm sorry, not years, months. Sorry, months.
Right.
108 to like 235 months. Yeah. And I remember looking at it, there's only like 42 levels or something, right? Like,
Yeah.
not much past where I was at. And it just couldn't comprehend.
Yeah. I love it when they say, but if you plead guilty, they'll knock off. If you
Right.
plead guilty in a timely manner, they'll knock off 3 levels.
Like, there's all these mitigating factors, and I'm like, how do I mitigate up to probation? Like, how do I make that my reality? So that was a kick in the gut, and then I got shipped off to Florence, Arizona at the CCA over there. And there's like moments and bits and pieces that I like distinctly remember. I remember being boxed and shackled, in Yuma, and like that process of getting, sent out takes forever. And I'm like day 7 or something, day 8 of my like detox, and I'm still feeling horrible. And there's like 3 women in this teeny tiny seat made for like 1 man. And we're all shackled together, and like I just hear all the guys in the back, right? And every one of them speaking Spanish to each other, but like, oh, what do you think? Is it heroin? Is it meth? Like, what do you think she's detoxing from? I'm just like, this is my personal hell. Okay. This is what I would imagine. And I went over to CCA, and like the federal government out there is contracted with treatment centers. So I did like an interview with one of the treatment centers, and they accepted me into their program. I'm a drug addict. So like, all the girls are like, don't go to treatment. Like, you want to kill your time. And I'm like, but I'm not okay. Being here for 4 months or being in treatment for 4 months and then going to prison, like, I'd rather do that.
Right.
I want to get something out of this experience, regardless of if I'm going to kill my number or not. So I went to treatment for 4 months. They, with like cases like this where it's like trafficking, right? I got indicted for transportation and distribution. And with cases like that, they just want to keep them moving because they happen so often in Arizona. We're right next to the border. And thank God it was Arizona, because our guidelines out here and like all the mitigating things I had versus like another state, it was night and day difference. My attorney looked at me at the time and she's like, listen, if you were in, some state like Midwest state, you'd be in prison for at least 10-15 years.
Yeah. I was gonna say, if you were in Florida or Georgia or something like that, or South Carolina, like you're probably gonna get 15 years. You're gonna get the low end of the guidelines, which is 180 months in your case. It's 15 years. Right.
So I did the drug program for 4 months here in Arizona called Crossroads. It's very strict, like guidelines. You can't go anywhere, so it was a lot better than being in jail. I can tell you that. I spent about a month there, and it was just, I don't know, there wasn't any progress happening there. So it's like, I want to go somewhere where I'm going to get better, not get worse. And then I pushed my initial sentencing off about 3 months, so I could stay out and have some time with my kids. I like made a couple amends while I was out. It was really challenging. Like, I knew I was going to prison. Like, there's no way I wasn't going to go to prison with the amount of drugs that I had on me. Like, right. Regardless of if I knew what was going on or not, like the way it looks is really bad. So like, I'm signing a plea agreement, and I signed one in December for transport, but it was like a lower level.
Right.
And so when they were doing like my pre-sentencing interview, I remember meeting with probation at that time, and I'm sober for a while now. I had some really good people backing me that were in the program. Like, I'm really getting into AA and stuff, and I'm working at this time. Like, somebody was willing to hire me. And so I had like a lot of letters to send to the judge, and which was really good, honestly. But I met with the probation officer there that was doing my pre-sentencing report, and I went over my whole history, right? Like leading up to that point. And it was like, I went to college. I was a good student. You know, I worked for the criminal justice system. Like I had all these positive things that were going for me, which made it a lot easier on me when it came down to like giving me the length of sentence. So I remember my attorney was talking about 7 years, and that was before the pre-sentencing interview happened. And I was just like, there's no way. You know, like I couldn't conceptualize doing 7 years, you know? And in my head, I'm like, okay, maybe 3. I could maybe do 3 years or like 7. What? And just not understanding how lucky I am to even hear like 7 years is on the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the PSI back, and the probation department was recommending 33 months in prison. And she's like, this is really good. Like normally the judge will, you know, they'll side with what probation wants. And I'm like, okay. But still like, holy you know, I've never been in trouble in my whole life, like to go to jail or to do any kind of time. And
yeah, it was a carload full of meth. Mm-hmm. They kind of frown on that.
They kind of do, man. They kind of do.
Sticklers about that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird. But yeah, 33 months. And then so February 20th was my sentencing date. So like I was doing a lot of stuff with my kids, took them on a little trip prior to like going into prison. I met some guy, right? And I told him my whole story. Like I was very honest. And this is kind of like my like I was getting what I needed to get in prior to going to prison, right? And then I met this guy, and he was like, let's get married. And this is 3 months in, right? And I'm like, sure, you know, you're a good guy. Like my mom needs support, you know, my kids need support. They don't have their dad around. Like, okay. And so going into prison, knowing like I might marry somebody, right? And February 20th rolls around, and I have my sentencing. And I mean, in the back of my head, I was just like, maybe they'll give me probation. I'm still delusional. I'm still in this mindset. Like, no, I'm a good person at heart. Like, I really am a good person at heart. I've just made some really poor choices.
Well, good people go to jail sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I needed to. So I remember the prosecution said their piece. You know, he wasn't very happy with me. My attorney said her piece, and she was actually crying. Like the courtroom was full. It was a good moment because I knew my mom was going to be there, right? And that day wasn't about me. Like that day was about finding people who could support my mom through watching her daughter get sentenced to prison. It stopped being about me for like that moment that I got arrested, and it became about my family. And so I wanted to make sure she had enough support around her because I knew she would take that the hardest. And my dad didn't end up showing up, which is okay. Like, I understand. And my sister wasn't there. It was my mom. So I had a lot of my really close friends there to help support her through that moment. And, you know, my attorney spoke, and she started to cry. And then I spoke from the heart, right? And have anything scripted. And I just cried a little bit, but not really, you know? I was strong in my convictions and knowing like this is happening, and I made really messed up choices, and I'm ready for my consequence. And the judge spoke, and the judge gave me 30 months. So she went lower than the recommended time. And then, you know, of course, like my mom is like screaming in the background in the courtroom. And that's, I think, the moment that I really cried. I was just like, wow. Okay. So like the marshal, you know, took me, he's like, I'm not going to handcuff you out here. Brought me back and handcuffed me back there. And he said, I need you to look at me. He's like, I've never seen anybody that's been in your position get that little time. And he's like, you need to find gratitude in like this whole situation. And even the judge, when she saw me that day, she like after sentencing me, she's like, listen, Megan, I'm going to be following you. Like, I'm going to watch watch you and see what happens. And like, I never let go of that. Like, I'm so glad she said that, because I was just like, I want to prove to you that like I can become something. I can become something because of this really crappy situation, and I will. And, you know, I ended up going back to CCA for a little bit. And then I went to a women's camp here in Arizona. So
Did you go to RDAP?
Yeah, I did. So the camp that I went to was actually the camp that I did a tour on when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
So that was a really interesting moment going there. But like the camp, I mean, you know, my attorney's like, Megan, you're going to prison. I'm like, okay. And she said, but you're going to go to a prison where like, you don't really need to be in prison, but like you kind of have to because you did something really messed up. And I'm like, all right. And she's like, you'll be going to a prison camp, most likely, right? Most likely in Arizona, as long as there's beds available, which there were. And I got really lucky because like where I went to prison was like in my backyard almost, you know, where I grew up.
Right.
Like 20 minutes from my mom's house, 20 minutes from my dad's house. In my backyard.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's easy for people to visit. Mm-hmm. It's nice to be close. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's hard driving by it though, you know. I'll say that. Like it definitely is triggering when I have to go up north, and it's like, oh, that's where I was. But so yeah, I got to prison. And then my attorney obviously recommended that I do RDAP. The judge agreed. And when I got in, it was very interesting because as soon as I landed, because of my sentence, it was low enough. I had the lower sentence of all the women who needed to get into the program. So it was 2 days in and I was in RDAP.
Right there, right? Immediately.
Mm-hmm. So I didn't make friends right away. Like they were not happy with me, you know. And I just remember getting there, and my bunkie at the time, Barb Smith, you know, she's like the 70-year-old woman who's in there for Medicaid fraud, and, you know, owes like $6 million to the federal government. Like has dementia, right? You know, there's no way they're getting their money from this woman. But I remember her as my bunkie, and I'm just like, this poor woman, like she had experienced some pretty, you know, heinous things at other prisons prior to going to that one because she had a pretty significant sentence. But I'm just like counting my blessings, you know. I'm talking to other women in there, and I made the mistake of like explaining my story and like what I did and how much time I got. And I explained it to this one woman, and she's just like, I had less than an ounce on me and I got 10 years in prison. What the? And I'm like, okay, I'm not sharing my story anymore. Like, no one's going to know that I had this much and got this little amount of time. And they're like, who did you snitch on? Like, could you get such little time? And like, that's just how the guidelines are set up. I don't know.
Yeah, you drove a car across the border. Right. I know. I mean, I actually, my wife has a friend that same thing. Same exact thing. Drove a car full. It was a car full of meth. Drove it across the border. Got popped. She got. I don't know. My wife's not here, but I think she got 3 or 4 years. Her same thing. But same thing when she first got caught. It was massive. But when they really look into it and they start to realize, no, this person was just a mule. They don't know anything. They don't know. They're not a part of the system. They're not a part of the conspiracy as much as they're just a transport. That's like arresting the, you know, and especially in your case, at least in her case, she was conscious that there were drugs in the vehicle. In your case, you'd been duped. Not that you wouldn't have driven it across.
Right. That part.
But you didn't. You didn't know.
Right. And I guess that's where the silver lining for me is in all of this stuff, where I don't harbor resentments towards them, because like if asked, you know, I probably would have regardless.
Right. So what did you think of RDAP?
RDAP. So I graduated RDAP. It was interesting. I don't know if it's the same everywhere you go, but it's like, a community-based therapy, right? So there's 70 women who live in the same unit as you, and like you have to tell on each other.
Yeah.
You have to. If you don't, then like you get pulled up or you get sent into the doctor's office, and
You're
she's
just
just
holding them
like,
accountable. You're just holding people
right.
accountable.
You're just
Listen, I took it
telling all
twice.
this stuff.
I took it twice.
Oh, good.
Never passed it.
No. I was
No,
good. I'm good though at like manipulating and like conforming.
it will make you good at manipulating. If you're
It
not
made me so good.
if you're not going in, you are great at it coming out. Like I really felt like I learned a lot in that program.
Mm-hmm.
Not manipulating, because I was already super manipulative.
Yeah.
Just I think it really helps you figure out how to categorize people. The problem with you and me and my wife and most of the people I know that went in the program, it was never difficult because the bulk of the people going in that program, like I used to say, look, they're just trying to get these guys to eat with silverware and say please and thank you. So it was hard for them at the first couple phases. It was that third phase where they come for the people that are already civilized. That was like that third phase is horrible. Yeah. And I dropped out of the third phase both times.
Oh, really?
Because by the time I was real quick, because I don't want to make it about me, although I almost always do. I was really only went in the program because by the time I had gotten my sentence reduced twice. So by the time my second reduction hit, I was so close to the door. Going to the program, I didn't get the year off. Like I was going to get a couple months off, and it was really just cutting into my halfway house. So I only really went in the program to keep myself at the prison because I was just like you. You were 20 minutes away. I was 1 hour away from Tampa, from where my mom lived. And I didn't want to get moved. So I went in the program to keep myself there. And then as soon as they put like a management variable on me, I dropped out. But it took months. So it was like 6 months. So the second time, then they told me it was going to be on for a year. And I figured I'll be in a halfway house by then. 3 months later, they took it off me. So they were like, yeah, we're shipping you to a camp. And I said, no. Listen, I got a problem. I made a mistake dropping out. I have a major problem. I can't be released like this. I can't stop thinking about, drugs and crime. And I got to go back in the program. So I went back in and convinced them that I'd made a mistake to let me back in. They let me back in 9 months. I was in there about 8 months just before, like when I dropped out the second time, they were like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, you're about to graduate. I was like, listen, I said, it's better I drop out now. I said, we both know. And I used to keep in mind, I used to fuck with the doctor, all of them so much because I didn't need the year. And I remember I said, listen, we both know I'm coming back. I'm going to need that year the next time. And they go, don't do that. Fuck. I was like, let's just be honest. So anyway, I dropped back out, and honestly, within about 2 months, I was in a halfway house.
Okay.
Like it didn't change anything for me, but I actually liked being in the program because everybody was very nice, and they have to be nice. All the inmates are on their best behavior.
See, my experience was just so much different. It was with women, so like very different. Like, I mean, they give you the prison rules, right? Like a handbook for prison, and they give you a handbook for RDAP, and you literally have to abide and uphold these rules. If you watch anybody who's not doing it, then like you need to pull them up, and if you don't, then you get pulled up yourself, right? It's this whole system of accountability, which I get, and it was the community model, which was okay. But my thing, and I told the doctor, I was like, listen, I get it. This is a community-based model, but you're wanting me, like, your community-based model is different inside prison because I'm not on the outside. This is where I sleep. This is where I stay. I'm around these women all day, every day. and I don't want to be, and I don't like most of them, and a lot of them don't like me. So like, I'm not opening up like you want me to. It just won't happen, you know. And the punishment for that obviously is, well, then you can't be in this program. So like, I opened up to a certain point, but like, I never gave them what they wanted. I would not do it, you know. Like, I did not have the best relationships with a lot of these women in there, and I watched as like they were just conniving. It was like high school on steroids almost, right? Like, these women had a lot of time on their hands, or they had already had a lot of time on their hands, and now this is like the very end, and it's like, who can I fuck over to take away their time off, you know? And so it was really challenging for me in that program, where like, like you said, I'm a civilized human being, you know, and some of us were, some of us weren't. Like, it was just like that. So my thing was like, I don't want to become friends with any of you. Like, I want to be as far removed from where I'm at as possible. So like, I'm putting my headphones in and I'm walking around listening to music, or like I'm sticking with an individual person. You know, I don't need the support from these groups to get me through. And they hated that. They fucking hated that. And they like targeted me.
I was going to say, you weren't being present in the program.
No.
You were. You had entitlement issues.
Oh, I did.
Oh,
I did. I got pulled up so much for that, and manipulation and this and this. And it was like, I'm not better than you guys. I just don't want to be a part of anything you have to offer. And if that offends you, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
My wife will use those terms every once in a while. She'll say, she'll do the whole, oh, you're suffering from super optimism, or you're suffering from, and because she went through it too. And I would just, you know, I'm like, don't do that. She's like, oh, you know, you've got entitlement issue. You know, it's so funny.
Oh my God. I will say what I learned, you know, I learned how to give feedback and receive feedback. And that is like one of my superhuman powers now. And it is, you know, it's benefited my life on the outside greatly, especially for the thing, like the job that I have today. It has greatly benefited me, and just building my self-worth too. You know, I could finally listen to somebody break me down and then tell me how I could fix it, which was really cool. But then there were moments where, like, you know, the DTSs, right? I remember Mr. Bruzan. He would come in and his thing was to be like, yeah, you're just a shitty mom. You're a real bad mom, you know? And that was like, and that's it. Like, this is why you're a bad mom. There was never any like, let's build you up to show you why you can be a really good mom, or like what made you a good mom, or what are good qualities that you have that you can take into becoming a good mom. It was really about.
He's a shitty DTS. I'm not. He's just such a shitty thing. You know,
it's awful. I remember, so like, I couldn't talk about my crime when I was in prison because I couldn't talk about it without talking about my kids' involvement. And for me, that was the epitome of being the worst mom in the world. And I remember I would do surface level papers, right, and talk about them. And I remember one day they were like, hey, you haven't done one yet. You need to do this in this group of 70 women and talk about your paper. I'm like, okay. And it was like core beliefs, right? And somehow, like, I had talked to a few women there about my crime and that I was really shameful that my children were involved in it. And during that group, one of them just like raises her hand up, right? And I knew what she was going to say because I had like confided in her. You know, I was very shameful of this. This wasn't something I wanted to talk about. And then, you know, she was like, well, weren't your kids with you when you got arrested? And I just remember I blacked out and I started going at her, not like physically, but like verbally. I was verbally going at her. And then the, you know, DTS at the time was like, whoa, calm down, this and this. And I just remember from that moment on, I was just like, fuck you, fuck this program. I'm not giving you what you want. That set me back so much in my recovery there. And, you know, it was never really addressed, but it was just weird, you know, like the DTSs, she went through my emails, right? And she like would be reading them as I'm doing a paper, like talking about like traumas and stuff. And then she was like, oh, why don't we talk about some of the stuff you and this man are talking about, right? Like bringing it up in the group. Like they were really, there was no boundaries with them.
Yeah, very intrusive. Listen, I remember there was a guy on the phone. You know, they're listening to your phone calls. The guy who was ready to get released and had been, carrying on a relationship with a woman or two women, and one of the women had sent him money, and I mean a lot of money. We're about $2,000-$3,000, so he could walk out of prison with $2,000 or $3,000. And they said, you're manipulating both of these women. You need to return the money, and you need to tell both of them about the other woman, or you could just spend another year in prison. This guy was like, yeah, he had to. So he had to call them both up and explain the situation to both of them. They both lost it. Had to send the money back. The whole thing. Like, I mean, it was. But here's the thing. They the DTSs and the doctors, like the doctor that ran the program in Coleman, her name was Dr. Smith. Like, listen, not always, but almost always, like she could just cut right through, see right through you. I mean, for me, she could see right through me. She could cut straight to, I mean, she just, listen, I don't think I ever walked into her office without coming out in tears. Every single time. Horrible, and manipulative. Like she definitely had some entitlement issues. But yeah, it was, I really, I'm glad I went to that program. I thank God I didn't need to pass.
Yeah.
If I needed to pass, I think I would have had a drastically different experience. I would have been, because everybody else was just scared all the time. They're always scared. They're always on edge. It was agony for most people, but luckily I didn't need to be there. I didn't need the year. And I thought worst case scenario is I get recycled. I'm okay with that. And it was because of that cavalier attitude, I really sailed right through it. And I did virtually nothing. Like my assignments, I almost did no assignments. You're supposed to take all these classes to teach you how to do things. I would actually took my sheet and just sign the name over and the guy's name who's supposed to sign you in. Or I never signed in. I would sign in maybe once and never sign in again and just acted like I went. I mean, I just blew, and it just nothing seemed to be catching up with me. It would catch up with other guys. Oh, I see that you skipped. You didn't go last week. And I'm thinking, I've never gone. How are they getting him? I've never gone. My books, they never checked my books, even though they would check everybody else's books. They would just never check mine, because I think the first couple phases, they felt like Cox has got this down. He's going to sail through. We'll get him on the third phase. But I kept dropping out of the third phase because they would have torn me apart.
They can never pull you into the office and give you the verbal lashing that they love to give.
Yeah, I saw guys that were they just tear them apart.
Oh yeah, they destroyed us in there. It wasn't about building up. It's literally just like, this is why you are a messed up individual. What are you gonna do about it? And I love them for their harsh reality, because it made me fire up even more of like, you treat me like I'm not even a human. I have made bad choices, but like, I'm going to show you why when I get out, I'm going to make so much more money than you, do so many more things than you thought I could ever fucking do. And I did that. I got out and I did that. You know what I mean? So I'm grateful for the motivation they gave me, but also under different circumstances with a different human, that could break them and really destroy them. If they don't have the resources, if they don't have just the ability to reach within and triumph over things like that could really break somebody. And it's a good program, and I'm grateful for it because it taught me about like my thinking patterns. It taught me that I am manipulative, but like I figured out like, oh, I can use this for good though. You know what I mean? Like they tell you all these like really bad things about yourself. And I kept just being like, I'm never going to get rid of this. Like I'm never not going to be manipulative ever in my life. It's not something I want to get rid of because I like that part of me. I just need to use it for good. And so I took all those things and just made it into something I can use to benefit me and to benefit other people in my life and to then teach and help others, you know?
Well, I think it's good that to know, if you know those things about you, you can stop there are times when you can stop yourself and say, wow, am I being selfish right now? Like, is that a selfish thing for me to have said? Or, wow, you know what? I'm going to stop here because that's super narcissistic and that's a real problem for me. Or I'm being overly, arrogant, or I'm not being kind to this person, So if you know those things about you, I'm not saying you can fix them all the time, but you can at least address them and sometimes stop yourself and say, wow, you know what? Where I definitely was not prior to prison, that wasn't even a consideration. It wouldn't have even considered asking you about yourself. The entire time I was talking to another person and listening to them, I was only waiting for an opportunity to talk about myself. I don't know what you just said. Like that's literally you. There were times on the street, I would talk to somebody for 30 minutes and walk away, and I didn't know anything about that person. I wasn't even paying attention to what they were saying. I couldn't recall half of what they were saying, but I was really just waiting for an opportunity to interject something about myself in that conversation, which is still an issue, but at least now I know it.
Mm-hmm.
So, or I can try and work on it. But I think, obviously you got stuff out of the program. You may not have been happy, but with being there, but you clearly did.
Yeah. I got some really good things out of it.
And you got a year off.
Well, I got 6 months off.
Oh.
So I wasn't there long enough, right? Like I literally had just gotten into the program, and then I did a year of RDAP because I still owed time. So I did a year-long program in RDAP, and then I got out with 6 months halfway house, which ended up turning into 7 months halfway house. Well, 7 months of home confinement.
Well, so you got 7 months and 6 months. I mean, you got something. That's a.
Oh yeah, no, that was the whole point. Like that was the goal, that was the reason behind why I did what I did and go into that. And like, it was a very beneficial thing, but also it was like a selfish motive, like if I finish this program inside and outside of prison, like I can be with my family sooner, I can be with my kids sooner. I can start reaching these goals that I finally have in my life a lot sooner, but I mean, it's still in prison. Like I made poor choices. Like I had a girlfriend the majority of the time I was locked up. So that's like not RDAP appropriate. So I was able to keep that relationship I was able to keep it out of the treatment program's knowledge for quite some time.
On the down low.
On the down low. Which is not easy. It's not easy. My third, part in being in that program, that's where things were like really tough for me. The first two, two portions of it were pretty easy. And then the third is like, where they're like, who's this person? Because she was in RDAP too. We were in RDAP together. And we were like right across the hallway from each other. And they had no idea until like all these women who really didn't like me, called me out. But it was just like, you can't really do anything. Like, you're not catching me doing anything. And me having somebody around a lot I'm not breaking any rules. So like, you can't really tell me what to do. That was my thing. It was just kind of my, fuck you to the system of like, yeah, I'm here, but like, I'm going to do it on my own terms. I'm going to graduate, and I'm going to do it in a way where you're going to look at me on the internet one day, right? And be like, oh my God, like I know her. I was an asshole to her, but I know her,
right.
But like I went into prison, and obviously had this relationship prior to going in, right? And I went in and he had the understanding, like, listen, I swing both ways, man. And I'm going to be in here, you know, possibly 30 months, but probably less. Like, something's going to happen, you know? And he was pretty aware of that. And I got really close with this girl when I was locked up, and I like connected my fiance, right? The guy I was dating at the time. I connected him with my best friend on the outs, because like I didn't want her to be lonely, right? Like, she was really messed up from me leaving. We were really close, and I wanted her to be able to have somebody, because like she was a recovering addict as well, and I didn't want her to relapse. Well, I'm gonna find out, like, they ended up hooking up, and you know, like they were using together, and this whole situation was happening, and it was really weird. Like, he would bring her to come visit me, and I distinctly remember one time, like, they came up to the prison, the two of them, right? And she was like weird, and so was he. And he was like, hey, I think I might just go outside to like let you two talk. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, no, like, why don't I leave? And I'm like, what? Like, what's going on? And I was like, I wanted to see both of you. Like, what are you talking about? So I'm pretty sure like that was the day they were going to let me know, like, this is what's going on, or they had a guilty conscience or something. But they were both super weird at that point, weren't really picking up my phone calls. So I figured something was going on, and I blocked both of them. Like, I just stopped talking to them. I blocked them from communicating with me over, you know, email and stuff. And then when I got out, come to find out, like, they were together, and they had like just gotten married when I got out of prison.
Whoa.
So and I remember watching Orange is the New Black going in, you know,
Right.
like trying to figure out what is the prison all about. And there are some, you know, there's some truths behind it, but I didn't realize it was going to be so fucking spot on with how my life was going to be when I got out. They're just funny, the similarities between that show and like what went on, and like falling in love in prison, you know.
Right.
I did not think that was going to happen. And I did meet some really, really amazing women in there who just like me, you know, had a really bad drug problem and needed the money to get what they needed to get, but also like some little fucked up too inside their head, you know? So there are a few women that, like two, like the girl I was with in prison, and then one more person that I stay connected with, that are doing well in life, you know? Like, they took the things that we learned in the program and they applied it to their everyday life, and they are doing well. And that program does do well for people. And I'm so happy that it does exist, not just for the time off, but like for the really cool things that you get to learn, you know? So it's definitely beneficial, but it was hard. So when I got out of prison, you know, I'm single at this time. I'm in the halfway house, and the halfway house situation was really weird because I got out right when COVID hit. Like, I remember hearing about COVID when I was locked up, and then I got out, and like a few days later, they're like, we're going on lockdown. So for the last year, I'm told you go to the halfway house, you work, you only sleep at the halfway house. That's all you do there. Like, you work, you sleep at the house. That's it. Like, don't make friends with anybody. You know what I mean? They're like prepping us. And it was just like, you didn't go anywhere the first month and a half. Like, you were stuck at the halfway house, and it was men and women, and it was from like all different levels, you know. It wasn't like all the minimum security women are here and minimum security men are here. It's any and all levels except sex offenders are down the road. So right. It was uncomfortable, you know, like we're housed with men and women, and I just stayed in my room until I could work. I was like, I'm not, you know, I don't understand you, and I'm not where you're at, you know, and I'm not going down to a level where you're at. And like, if I don't need to be where you're at, you know, so I'm just going to stick with myself until I find people I want to be around who like have the same drive and motivation that I do, that aren't looking at this situation as like a party, or I don't know. Like I looked at this as a learning opportunity and a lesson building and a character building opportunity. And that was it. And I was never fucking doing this again. So when I was able to work, I started like working in treatment you know, because I'm like a recovering addict and I always wanted to work in treatment, and an opportunity presented itself. So I was on home confinement, right? Like I'm still technically an inmate, but they hired me on, and it was like so thankful and blessed for that. You know, like I had an opportunity to work instantly and like make decent money. I started to, you know, do overnights as a behavioral health tech at that particular facility. And I stayed 3 months in the halfway house and then went to home confinement with my mom. And in total, I was on home confinement for 7 months, which was a lot. I mean, they have a lot of rules and regulations, but it was all right. You know, it wasn't too bad. Continue to like work in the industry I'm in. And I just got a raise and like better like promotions, right? Like I went to a different company, got promoted, like went somewhere else, got promoted again. I was doing admissions and case management. I ended up getting off of probation 1.5 years early. Like I did everything I was supposed to do to the T. You know, like I'm still afraid to speed today. Like I don't even want to like jaywalk. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of instilled a fear in me of doing something wrong and being triggered that like I'm a shameful person kind of thing. But I started working as like business development for a treatment center. So my job was to go around and, you know, kind of vet other programs, other treatment centers, other mental health programs, and like get referrals in, send referrals out, like try to help people get into treatment. And it was beautiful. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I loved the one-on-one hands-on with these people. Like early on, my job was like direct patient care. And that was a perfect position for me because I am prime and ready. Like I just did RDAP. You're not getting anything by me, you know? And I got to help a lot of people. Like I got to help a lot of people just like me and share my experience, strength, and hope, and let them know like, hey, I did travel that road. If you want to do something different, that's great. I have some great tools. But if not, like, you know what's out there, you know, and I was able to make like a name for myself in this industry, like a good name, you know, one where they're like, oh, Megan Racer, yeah, I know her. I love her, right? Like, oh, she's really good at what she does. And it's like a male dominated industry. You know, I thrive in places where people tell me I can't do something. And I'm like, great. I'm so glad you did that because I'm going to show you why I can. And, you know, I get to make pretty decent money doing what I do. I get to travel doing what I do. I get to meet tons of people that have lots of letters behind their names. And, you know, I've been to school for years and years and years, and I'm respected by them. And this is it's just such a transition from where I was almost 5 years ago. You know, I'm coming up on my 5 years sober and the 5 years to the day that I was arrested in July. And it kind of amazes me because I spent 14 months total locked up, right? And that's with like detention and prison and all that, like 14 months on a 30-month sentence with then 7 months home confinement. And from the time I was arrested in 2018 in July to now, like I'm kind of shocked. You know, I'm shocked at the things I was able to make happen. Where people find excuses, I find reasons to push harder, you know? And I love having motivated people around me that are just like that. I love people who have stories and pasts and they have a history with being knocked down and getting back up. Like those are the people I want to work with. That's the person I want to work side by side with, you know, like the owner of the company I work for had spent a good portion of his life in prison. And that was like, oh my God, you know, and he's just a smart, genuine, like good-hearted, good morals and value kind of person. It was just like, you're my new mentor. You know, like you did this really fucked up kind of crazy stuff and early on and now you're like doing something with it. Like, you're making a difference. You're helping people. Like you're helping moms and dads get their daughters back and their sons back. And that's so important to me. And I wouldn't have been able to get to this point and make an impact like I do without, like you said, without getting arrested that day.
Right.
You know, if I wasn't arrested, I probably wouldn't have made it. I was shooting up a couple grams of heroin a day with a bad meth habit, you know? Like if I didn't kill myself, like I probably would have put my kids in harm's way and harmed them. And so, you know what I mean? Like God intervened in that moment and was like, you're going to have to go through all this pain, Megan, but like the fruits of your labor are going to pay off. It's just going to take time. You know,
Right.
You're just going to have to suck it up and be okay with feeling uncomfortable for a while. But no, like your kids love you, your mom, your parents love you. Like I've been able to help my stepdad get sober because of like the journey I took, you know? Like he reached out one day and was like, I need help. I can't do this anymore. Like my sister reached out to me for help. I've been able to show my family, like, you can rely on me. You know?
Right.
That's right there. Like, I never thought that was possible from the past that I had and the crap that I did to, like, have my family love me that much, to trust me like that.
I appreciate you, you know, being interviewed, you know, coming on the show, I guess, even though you're not really on the show, you're
Right.
sitting in your office. But I do appreciate you, you know, spending this time and going through everything and going through the story. If, you know, is there anything else you could think of?
I think that's my life. It's really,
Yeah. No,
the
it's
more I
good.
explain it, the less like bad it sounds, you know, but that's it.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. There, you know, there were no car chases, you know, there was no shootouts. There was no, you know, not as exciting as, you know, some of the guys, but you know,
Right.
it's good. It's good. Yeah, no, it definitely is definitely a situation that you definitely got through and it's definitely an inspiring story. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm glad things worked out and I'm sure they're going to continue to work out. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, subscribe, hit the bell, leave me a comment, and check the description for Megan's LinkedIn. I hope you guys like the podcast, and I really appreciate it. See ya.